Good morning. It's time for Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 through 6. This is episode number 16 of our study of the book of Hebrews. So today we are continuing this thought process, really with trying to summarize the thought process that is really carried on the past chapter. And that is really the past couple of chapters that Jesus is our high priest, but he's not just the normal run of the mill priest, the normal run of the mill high priest, even. He is a heavenly high priest. So today, the writer of Hebrews is going to be summarizing that, and let's jump into it together and let's understand this picture. And it's a pretty remarkable picture when you really understand what the writer of Hebrews is actually saying here in this section. So let's look at it together. So the writer of Hebrews is going to start by giving a summary of the points that he has previously made in the prior couple of chapters about Jesus as our high priest. And this is how he says this. He says, now this is the main point. This is the main point. This is what I'm trying to get to. This is what I'm trying for you to understand about everything that I have previously said. And here's my main point, and that is this: we have such a high priest. So he talks about Jesus as the high priest. Now, if you remember what we have talked about as the purpose of the high priest in the Levitical system, in the temple and the tabernacle of God that was made on this planet, the high priest served a specific function. And that was that the high priest was to be a mediator, and the high priest was one that was to bear the burdens of the people. So bear the burdens. So the high priest would make intercession. He would be the go-between between holy God and sinful man. He would first make a sacrifice for himself, and then he would offer up sacrifices on behalf of the people. One time per year, he would go into the Holy of Holies, which is the innermost chamber of the temple of God, and he would make atonement for the people at that place. He would also carry the burdens of the people upon his shoulders. Now, Jesus is the ultimate high priest because he's the ultimate mediator, the go-between between a holy God and sinful man, and he bears the burdens. All of our burdens, all of our sins were placed upon him on that cross. He carried all of our burdens upon his shoulders as he was crucified in our place on our behalf. He was the ultimate sacrifice. So he is the great high priest. So here's the point of Hebrews. This is the main point, he says, of the things that I was talking about earlier. We have such a high priest. Now, I want you to notice some things that he's going to say, because the things that he's going to say are critically important to our understanding of this idea as Jesus as high priest. In fact, they're pretty fascinating things that the writer of Hebrews is going to bring up. So we have a high priest who is very different from all of the earthly high priests, the succession of high priests that there have always been in the temple. Because this high priest, our high priest, is seated at the right hand of the throne of the majesty in heavens. Now, why is it important? Why does he bring up the fact that Jesus is seated at the right hand of the throne? Well, this is in complete contrast to the continual service of the priesthood under the law of Moses. The tabernacle and the temple, according to the law of Moses, were representations, excuse me, of the old covenant. The priests never sat down. There was no place for them to sit down because their work was never finished. They were constantly doing work, sacrifices on behalf of the people. They were working on behalf of the people as the representation between them and God, as the mediator between sinful people and God. They were constantly doing sacrifices, and there was no place to sit down. And again, it's because their work was never finished. But Jesus, when he accomplished his work, he would sit down. So Jesus, as our high priest, as the high priest representing us, he is seated, meaning the work is finished. His work is done. His work is complete. He is different from every other high priest in the temple of God, serving for the people and as the mediator between them and God. They would not sit down because their work could not be done. But Jesus said on the cross, "It is finished." The work is done. he ascended into heaven, and he is seated at the right hand of God, meaning, again, it is finished. That finished product, that finished work. There's no more work that needs to be done. It's all finished. Everything is complete. Everything is accomplished that Jesus wanted to accomplish. Now here's what he's going to go on to say. We have such a high priest who is seated at the right hand of the throne of God, at the throne of the majesty, that's the Father, in the heavens. This high priest is a minister. That's what a high priest does. They're ministers for the people. But our high priest, Jesus, is a minister of the sanctuary and of the true tabernacle, which the Lord erected and not man. Now, that is an important statement that is being made, and I just want you to note this statement because this statement is telling. Here's what he is saying. In heaven, there is an actual tabernacle. There is an actual sanctuary. These are the original. When God spoke to Moses and he gave them the commands and the template for the temple and the tabernacle, the earthly, on earth, the tabernacle or the temple, these are merely copies. These are copies of the original that is in heaven. There is a heavenly throne room. There is a heavenly temple. There is a heavenly tabernacle. There is a heavenly sanctuary. That is the original. The things on earth are copies. They are imitations of the original. When they build the next temple, which will be the third temple, when it gets built in Jerusalem, it is just a copy of the second temple, which is a copy of the first temple, which is a copy of the tabernacle that was erected in the wilderness, which is a copy of the actual throne room, tabernacle, sanctuary of God that sits in heaven today. So Jesus is unlike all of the other high priests because all of the other high priests were merely serving in the copies. But Jesus is the minister and he is the high priest in the original. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Therefore, Jesus is the ultimate high priest. Jesus made a sacrifice once. This sacrifice once was made to satisfy the original tabernacle and temple. The copies required daily sacrifices, ongoing, multiple, time and time again. Therefore, the high priests in those copies could not sit and rest because it could never be finished. But the minister and the high priest of the original temple and tabernacle made a one-time sacrifice, and after he made that, he said, "It is finished." And after he said it was finished, he sat down because it is done. There's no more work that needs to be done. Well, I hope that makes sense because that's an important concept to understand if you want to understand what the writer of Hebrews is really talking about. Well, we're going to jump ahead now to verse 3. Here's what he says: "For every high priest," now this is the copies, these are the earthly high priests, this is the copy. Every high priest who is serving in the copy of the original, so every high priest serving in the tabernacle or the temple that's made in earth, is appointed, this, meaning this is their job, this is their requirement, to offer both gifts and sacrifices. That's what they do. They offer gifts and sacrifices in the copy of the temple and the tabernacle. That's their job. They're appointed to do this. Therefore, it is necessary that this one, the real high priest, the ultimate high priest, also has something to offer. So if the job of the priest, the job of the high priest is to offer gifts and sacrifices, well, that goes to show that then the ultimate high priest, the ultimate high priest also must offer gifts and sacrifices. He has something to offer. Every high priest is appointed to offer both gifts and sacrifices. The sacrifice for sin is the essential concept of the priesthood. Jesus represented a superior priesthood, and he offered a superior sacrifice. He laid down his own life to atone for sin. So it's necessary. Though Jesus never offered a sacrifice according to the law of Moses, he did it one better. He offered a better sacrifice, the sacrifice of himself. Verses 4 and 5. For if he were on earth, if Jesus were on earth, Jesus would not, he would not be a priest, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law. Why couldn't Jesus be a high priest on earth? Because that comes out of the tribe of Levi. And Jesus wasn't out of the tribe of Levi. Jesus came out of the tribe of Judah. He came out of the kingly tribe. The tribe of Levi was the priestly tribe. But again, where were the tribe of Levi appointed? Well, they were appointed by Moses after Moses had received the commands of God to build the tabernacle, the temple, after he had received the law of God. After he had received that, he said to the Levites, "You're the priests, and you're going to offer sacrifices on behalf of the people." So again, this all represents the copy. Jesus, though, is the high priest of the original. He didn't come out of the tribe of Levi. He could not be a priest on earth, since there are priests who offer the gifts according to the law. Jesus wasn't a part of this group, so he couldn't be. But this group, look what it says, who serve the copy and the shadow of the heavenly things. They're serving as a high priest, or they did when the temple was there and when the tabernacle was there. They served as high priests of a copy. It wasn't the original. Because where was the original? Well, think again what we have said. The original was with God in heaven. So in heaven, you have the original temple, the original tabernacle. And on earth, you have copies, copy and shadow, it says. A shadow is a copy. If you're walking down the sidewalk on a sunny day and you look over, you will see your shadow. Your shadow is just the copy of you. It's not the original, it's just a copy. The tabernacle and the temple on earth were just copies. They were just shadows of something that was original in heaven. So Jesus would not be a high priest according to the law, because they are just serving the copy and the shadow. They're copying and shadowing the real heavenly tabernacle, the heavenly temple, the heavenly throne room with all of the furnishings in the throne room. The furnishings in the temple apparently match the furnishings of the original. So everything God did was a copy of, or he had the original, and everything he commanded Moses was just to be a copy of this. So he says that they were serving the copy and the shadow of the heavenly things as Moses was divinely instructed when he was about to make the tabernacle. God told Moses what to do. For God said to Moses, "See that you make all things according to the pattern shown you on the mountain." So the earthly temple, the earthly tabernacle is it's a pattern. It's a copy. It's a shadow. It's not the original. That's not God's intent. God has the original tabernacle and temple in heaven with the original throne room, which the original with the original holy of holies, with all the original furnishings. It's all there with him in the throne room of God, in the temple of God, in the tabernacle of God, in the place where Jesus sat down because it was ultimately finished. Well, one more verse and we will wrap up today's Bible study. Verse 6 says this: "But now, but now, this is the product. But now, he, Jesus, has obtained a more excellent ministry. Now, what did the high priest do? Well, every high priest had a ministry. And what were their ministries? Their ministries were to offer gifts and sacrifices. That was their ministry. Their ministry was to make atonement for the people. Their ministry was to be a mediator for the people. Their ministry was to bear the burdens of the people upon their shoulders. That was their ministry. But now Jesus has obtained a more excellent ministry. So now Jesus's ministry is more excellent than anything that those temporary high priests could have done. He has replaced this with something much better, because he has brought a new covenant, inasmuch as he is also mediator of a better covenant, which was established on better promises. So Jesus's ministry is still to offer a gift and to offer a sacrifice. What was the gift? It was his own life. What was the sacrifice? It was his blood. It was his death upon the cross. He became a more excellent mediator. He became had a more excellent ministry. He brought a more excellent way. Jesus is our mediator of a better covenant, a greater covenant. The word mediator in the Greek language is the word mesetes, and the word mesetes means one who stands in the middle between two people and brings them together. Moses was the mediator of the old covenant because he brought the two parties together. Jesus is the mediator of the new covenant, a better covenant, because he is bringing us to God the Father. Jesus is the better covenant, better than all of the previous covenants made by God with men. And there were several in the Bible. The covenant of Jesus fulfills the other covenants that were described in the Bible. In the Bible, there are a few covenants. Let me mention a couple of them. There is what's called the eternal covenant. That's the members of the Godhead that made possible the salvation of man. There's God's redemptive plan that was made in the covenant that happened between he and Abraham. There's the Mosaic covenant that was another step in God's redemptive plan that was made between Moses and the people of God and God himself. It was the Mosaic covenant that was made through the law. There was also the Davidic covenant that was given to King David, and it was yet another step in the fulfillment of God's redemptive plan. The ultimate thing, though, is that God's redemptive plan was fulfilled in God, in Jesus himself, in the new covenant. And all of this was established on better promises. Jesus had made better promises for us. These are promises to see us through the most desperate and dark times of life. These are promises that become alive to us through the Spirit of God. These are promises of blessing and undeserved favor instead of promises to curse and to judge. We are under better promises. We are under a better covenant. We are under a better way. And it's all thanks to Jesus, who came as the ultimate high priest, who came with a better ministry and more excellent ministry, who laid down his life and offered his life as a gift to all of mankind. And all who would go through Jesus as the mediator will find hope and freedom with the Father. Eternal life, forever and ever, with God. What could possibly be better than that? Well, I hope that that's something that was helpful to you today, and I hope that you understand a little bit of the idea of the temple, the idea of the tabernacle, the idea of Jesus as our ultimate high priest. Thanks for joining me today, and I'll see you back here next time.